Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Neon, and we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Kind of. We're actually going to talk about TSR coming back. TSR is coming back. I just found this out like the other day. I had a couple people tag me in. We had some people in the comments of another YouTube video said, hey, do you guys know that TSR is back? They actually put a press release out. TSR, for those of you who don't know, were the creators of Dungeons and Dragons. They were the company that had the rights to Dungeons and Dragons in the 80s and 90s, and eventually D&D wound up with Wizards of the Coast, and we know what happened there. I'm not real happy with the direction that Wizards of the Coast has taken Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's gotten overly political. It's also gotten very Hollywood. We know that Critical Role has definitely taken it to push Dungeons and Dragons to a new audience. Let's put it that way. And a lot of old school gamers, old school tabletop gamers like myself, felt sort of lost, I guess, trying to get back into tabletop and looking at what things have become. But TSR is back. It includes Larry Elmore, art legend Larry Elmore, who did many pieces of art for D&D back in the day, and Gary Gygax's son. So I'm not sure if this TSR will be like the TSR of yesteryear, but it's really interesting that they're choosing now to make a comeback. And we'll talk a little bit about TSR, and I guess they attempted to make another D&D back in the day, and that didn't go very well. And we'll also talk a little bit about Gary Gygax, some things people don't know about Gary Gygax. I think current year Gary Gygax would probably get canceled. Because we know everybody is so hyper-focused on people's political opinions these days. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We're almost at 200,000 subs. Almost. We're a couple hundred away. I think we're like 250 subs away. So make sure you're still subscribed. Subscribe if you like the content. We do talk about tabletop gaming. We talk about pop culture. We talk about the animation industry, comics, whatever interests us that day. Lately, we've been talking a lot about the culture wars because, unfortunately, gaming is no longer a safe space from the culture wars. The culture wars have crept into, well, I would actually say tabletop gaming first, even more so than video gaming, and now into comics and animation, anime, and all of that. We have a lot of people that don't want to leave their politics at the door when they come to the gaming table. In fact, they demand politics in their gaming. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, the conversation that's been going on for the last year or two, that D&D is a racist game, that orcs are racist, all this other stuff that's going on in D&D. And again, it can be traced back to the audience shift, let's put it that way, of D&D. And, part of that is because of the popularity that D&D has seen with Hollywood types, I think, Tumblr. But let's talk first about TSR. Here's the official press release announcing their return. Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, June 15th, 2021, PR.com. Tactical Studies Rules was founded in 1973 by E. Gary Gygax and Don Kay. Originally formed in 2020, TSR Games is officially back and under the leadership of Gary Gygax Jr. I'm thrilled to be part of this next generation of gaming and hope that you will all find it cut from the same cloth as my old TSR experiences as we forge a new TSR Games, said Gygax, continuing, thanks to the vision of our CEO, Justin Lanasa, and the help of Wonderfield, we're bringing TSR back home to Lake Geneva. It really means so much to me. TSR was behind the original Dungeons & Dragons, first released in 1974, now a worldwide phenomenon owned by Hasbro on its fifth and most popular edition yet. The team includes Justin Lanasa, Ernest Gary Gygax Jr., Jeff R. Leeson, Stephen Deinhardt. Lanasa is a visionary and entrepreneur that has set out to reunite brands like TSR with the original talent behind them. It's with great pride that we've managed to secure the TSR brand, born here in 1973 and brought back to the people who created this new form of game that changed the world. In addition to the classic lines of products at TSR Museum and Dungeon Hobby Shop, TSR Games is working to bring a new generation of role-playing games and more to players worldwide. Now more than ever, the world needs TSR. Now more than ever, the world needs TSR. We're happy to be bringing it back for experienced and new players alike. Yeah, it depends. I was excited about it. I posted about it on Twitter, and I had a couple people be like, yeah, they're just buying the name. The fact that Gygax Jr. and Larry Elmore are involved, it's a pretty good sign. It's a pretty good sign, right? Giant Lands is now a TSR game. So this is Wonderfield Inc.'s game right here. Giant Lands is the latest inception of shared imagination, the ability to create a palette where others may immerse themselves in your own creation. So yeah, they're starting to build a portfolio of, I believe, Kickstarter games. They just launched the website not too long ago, and I am really looking forward to see what they do. Now, do I think they're going to create a D&D killer? No, but I think that D&D would have gone down a decidedly different path had Hasbro not purchased it or purchased Wizards of the Coast, which purchased D&D, because D&D has become incredibly political lately. And, I think it's alienated a lot of old school fans. I'm hoping TSR can maybe bring things back to basics and be like, look, this is an apolitical game. We're just about bashing monsters and having fun, and that is it. But this isn't the first attempt, I guess, at a Gygax to bring back D&D or return to tabletop gaming. I read about this a year or two ago that the D&D creator could release another game with the D&D initials. That Gygax was actually going to do, what was this game called? Dangerous Dimensions. D&D, DD. Yeah, they actually went to court over that. But speaking of where D&D is now, they talk a lot about Critical Role, and they basically said that Critical Role is responsible for the current popularity of D&D. And I think it also explains the audience shift. They said thanks to 19 million hours of D&D shows, mostly Critical Role, it's helped D&D publisher Wizards of the Coast sell more books in 2020 than any year before, even when the game belonged to original publisher TSR, and it was a phenomenon in the 80s. What's really interesting is this article was put out days before TSR officially announced that they were coming back. I just want to put that out there. It's almost like Wizards of the Coast might be a little bit nervous that the creators of their most popular, well, I don't know if D&D is more popular than Magic, but one of their most popular franchises is coming back. And they might possibly, maybe, they'll start out small, but they might actually pull some people away from D&D. A lot of people who, I guess, are not happy with how Hollywood Dungeons and Dragons has become, because it was not a glamorous thing back in the 80s. You were actually made fun of if you played D&D back in the 80s. And old school D&D creators even aren't terribly happy with the current state of D&D. In fact, Tracy Hickman was mocking Critical Role. Hickman removed this post, reject modernity, embrace tradition. The Critical Role crew versus Dragonlance. And Tracy Hickman, Margaret Wise, they've had problems with Wizards of the Coast when it comes to Dragonlance. There was a lawsuit. A lot of old school creators are not terribly happy with the state of D&D right now. And I got to tell you, I would be incredibly thrilled if they could bring that feeling back. If I could feel like I was in 5th grade playing D&D again back in the 80s, that would be really cool. That'd be a cool thing to see happen. I don't know if it's going to happen or not, but I think the world does need TSR, or at least some people that remember their roots, right? Side note, since we talk about how political D&D has become, I gotta wonder if Gygax Sr. wouldn't get canceled these days, because he was a very outspoken libertarian. He liked weapons. He liked the free market. Reason's actually done some articles on him. You should check it out. But I think his philosophy would not mesh well with the current audience of Dungeons and Dragons. Let me just put it that way, right? Because everything has become so hyper political. And we saw Scott Cawthon get canceled from his own game, from Five Nights at Freddy's. He got canceled because he donated to Trump. Now, I don't think Gary Gygax would necessarily be a fan of Trump, but he definitely had some more conservative-ish leanings, and people have been calling that out for a couple of years. Over here on Twitter, Gary Gygax was a libertarian, and D&D reeks of it in its meritocracy-based level system, enumerated innate ability. So there you go, guys. I'm going to wrap this up. Definitely going to look forward to seeing what TSR does. God, I hope they come back. I hope they come back guns blazing. I would love to see it. Love to see it. Please subscribe. We'll talk to you later.